Telcom. Isn't that the satellite that's raining debris all over Europe?
Welcome back to Cine 1960s. Close your eyes for a moment and go back to 1985 with me. That was the era of worn-out VHS tapes and weekend evenings gathered around the family television. When mentioning the 80s, we often immediately remember noisy teen movies, but Real Genius is a gem with a completely different nuance. If you are like me, you must have been captivated by the brilliant, beautifully reckless demeanor of a young Val Kilmer. But behind the guise of a nerdy comedy, this work hides behind-the-scenes secrets that are unbelievably strange. Do you know how fragile the boundary between real physical science and cinematic visual effects in the movie is? Or the fact that this script accidentally touched upon military weapon ideas that even the Pentagon was startled by? Today, make a cup of coffee, sit down and help me dust off this memory tape. We will dissect 20 shocking facts behind Real Genius that I bet you completely missed when watching it back then. Are you ready to look back at this classic work with completely new eyes? 1. The house flooded with popcorn and the real fire. This fact always makes me smile when thinking about how Hollywood used to make movies. Do you remember the scene where the house exploded because it was flooded with popcorn? Surely many people thought it was an optical trick. But the 1985 crew literally played it big when they built a real house and poured 190,000 pounds of popcorn into it. However, this is the behind-the-scenes secret that shocked me. To pop that much popcorn, industrial machines had to run at full capacity continuously. The consequence was that the oil overheated, causing a fire that burned down the entire production warehouse right in the first few days. Now, every time I rewatch that classic movie scene, I seem to smell the burnt butter and feel the panic of the film crew. Their risky dedication is truly appreciable. Have you ever microwaved and completely blackened a bag of popcorn? 2. Val Kilmer intentionally insulted the producer. Do you remember the reckless, arrogant demeanor of Chris Knight? Val Kilmer did not just act, but truly embodied the character even before filming began. Imagine a young actor walking into the casting room and throwing sarcasm right in the face of powerful producer Brian Grazer. What a crazy move. In Hollywood, that action could easily suffocate a career. But Grazer was not offended. He realized that standing in front of him was the perfect embodiment of an arrogant genius. The boldness, ignoring all etiquette rules that day, helped Kilmer win the role of a lifetime. Very few people dare to bet their future on such a prickly attitude. It was that original, unforced nature that truly breathed life into the work. Have you ever dared to break safe boundaries to rise up and seize a big opportunity in your life? 3. Leaving Hollywood to practice Zen meditation. Remember Jordan, the hyperactive nerdy girl who never sleeps and talks as fast as a sewing machine? Michelle Meyerink played that role so wonderfully that we thought she was just as noisy. But real life always contains extremely unpredictable turns. In 1988, right when her career was at its brightest, she suddenly gave up everything. No more red carpets or flashlights, she quietly left glamorous Hollywood to become a Zen Buddhist teacher. This contrast truly fascinates me. It is ironic and also beautiful that the most restless character in the movie is the one who finds the deepest silence in real life. In the blink of an eye, fame was left behind. Have you ever stopped and thought if you are brave enough to let go of the peak of fame to find peace? 4. The original script was supposed to be a cheap comedy. If you grew up in the 80s, you must be familiar with school comedies full of ridiculous and vulgar jokes, like Revenge of the Nerds. Surprisingly, the original script of Real Genius also followed exactly that same path. Initially, it was just a mess of cheap jokes aimed at making quick money. But we really have to thank director Martha Coolidge. She looked at the draft, shook her head, and firmly demanded to tear it down and rebuild it entirely. Thanks to that brave decision, the work was transformed into a rare movie of that time that honored true intellect. Instead of making people laugh with superficial gimmicks, the movie created a world where nerds are not only funny, but also very cool. Just think, if the script had not been rewritten that day, Would we still remember this work? 5. A spectacular comeback thanks to cable television. The summer of 1985 was truly a fierce battlefield. Do you remember which work dominated the box office at that time? Yes, it was the DeLorean time machine of Back to the Future. Stuck under that massive shadow, our movie bitterly failed at the box office. Looking back, it was quite an injustice. But Hollywood always has miracles. Do you remember the lazy afternoons in the early 90s? When we curled up on the sofa aimlessly surfing cable television channels. Thanks to being continuously broadcast on television, it made a spectacular comeback. From a loser, it crept into every living room, recruited countless loyal fans, and became a true classic. Sometimes, greatness just needs a little more time. Did you go to the theater to watch this blockbuster, or accidentally discover it through cable television like me? 6. The McDonald's scam to win prizes was real. Do you remember Laszlo, the guy who lived holed up in the closet, spending his entire youth collecting winning coupons? Using statistical mathematics to bypass the McDonald's draw rules sounds like a cunning joke cooked up by Hollywood. But wait, this fact will amaze you. That crazy tactic was directly inspired by a real event in 1974. At that time, 3 students from the prestigious Caltech Institute of Technology applied exactly this trick. They joined forces to successfully hack the McDonald's system, taking home countless gifts. It is funny and admirable to think that, before the era of widespread internet, genius minds used top-tier math just to get free fast food. Is that not the pinnacle of applied intellect? Have you ever patiently cut every single stamp coupon yourself, hoping to win a tiny household item? 7. The deleted floating scene. The 80s were the golden era of crazy and limitless filmmaking ideas. But sometimes, even with a bold work like Real Genius, the production team had to know when to stop. In the early script drafts, there was an extremely bizarre scene where the character Chris Knight tied dozens of giant helium-filled balloons to a folding chair, casually sat on it, and floated out the window. Luckily, the filmmakers soberly decided to cut it at the last minute. Although this idea sounds funny and very cartoonish, it was too ridiculous compared to the flow of the movie. We love Chris for his sharp mind and underlying rebellious personality, not for illogical actions. However, closing my eyes and imagining a young Val Kilmer floating in the air on a folding chair is enough to make me laugh out loud. 8. The real-life 14-year-old prodigy failed the audition miserably. When building the character Mitch Taylor, a timid freshman but possessing a mind beyond his age, the film crew came up with an extremely breakthrough casting idea. Why not invite a real-life prodigy to play this role? And they did. A 14-year-old boy, who had graduated from college early with outstanding intellect, was invited to audition. However, contrary to expectations, the casting session failed miserably. Although he was more than capable of solving complex quantum physics equations, he completely lacked the emotional expression skills and flexibility needed in front of the camera. This story makes me realize a quite profound truth. Academic intellect can never replace emotional intellect. The art of acting always requires truly deep empathy. Sometimes, sensitivity in the soul is far more important than countless dry transcripts. 9. A sharp warning about technology ethics. Behind the refreshing laughs and the series of mischievous jokes typical of a school campus, this work actually carries an underlying message worth pondering. Released right in the middle of the peak tension of the Cold War in 1985, the movie bravely raised an extremely painful ethical issue. Young, naive minds passionate about research could accidentally create weapons of mass destruction for the government. The teen comedy exterior is actually just a smooth way to convey a deep warning about the responsibility of scientists. Looking back at this message today, I am truly amazed by the terrifying coincidence. In the era where artificial intelligence is making long strides, the question about the purpose of technology is hotter than ever. The boundary between passion and abetting evil forces is truly very fragile. 10. The director intentionally falsified the principles of laser weapons. When building the scene about the destructive laser weapon system, talented female director Martha Coolidge faced a dilemma. On one hand, she wanted the movie to look truly convincing. On the other hand, she worried about real security risks. Therefore, she made a surprising decision, requiring the design team and advisors to proactively falsify the core physical details. This tough decision was to absolutely ensure that the movie would never become a weapon-making manual for evildoers. In a Hollywood that always chases after terrifying authenticity, a director voluntarily distorting her work to protect public safety is an extremely rare thing. What do you think about this meaningful sacrifice? 11. Mythbusters proved the ending scene was unscientific. The popcorn-flooded ending of the work is definitely one of the most iconic movie scenes of the 80s. Let us be honest, who among us has not dreamed of pressing a button and seeing the house of a bad guy explode into a rain of snacks? But sometimes, reality is a splash of cold water. Many years later, the troublemaking boys of the Mythbusters program decided to put this legendary scene to the test. And the result? Completely unscientific. Adam and Jamie proved that a laser could never pop such a massive amount of popcorn that fast. Furthermore, the light and fluffy popcorn kernels themselves could never create enough pressure to destroy the foundation of a house. Even so, I believe that sometimes we should let logic sleep and allow cinematic magic to do its job. Do you feel a bit disappointed knowing this naked truth? 12. The invisible difficulty when filming lasers. When mentioning sci-fi movies of the 80s, we often assume that lasers must shine brightly and tear through the night like a lightsaber in Star Wars. But the reality on set was a completely different nightmare. In 1985, traditional film cameras basically could not capture authentic laser light the way the human eye sees it. Lasers in reality are almost invisible in clean air. To solve this tough puzzle, the production crew had to pump a thick amount of artificial smoke into the studio, creating tiny dust particles for the light to cling to and reflect. Without computer graphics to save the day, they had to test continuously for months, adjusting every camera angle just to make that deadly light appear threateningly on the screen. That manual patience is truly amazing, is it not? 13. Val Kilmer moved into a dorm to get into character. We often hear about Hollywood actors losing dozens of pounds, or living in the wild to get into a role. But the way Val Kilmer prepared for the character, Chris Knight carried an equally quirky and interesting nuance. To truly understand the arrogant yet eccentric nature of a genius, the young actor at that time packed his bags and completely moved into a real college dormitory. Before filming began, he spent weeks just quietly observing the daily routines, way of speaking, and logical thinking of science students. Kilmer wanted to know exactly how a top-tier nerd would joke and react to the world around him. It was that dedication, completely immersing himself in that academic environment, that helped him mold a Chris Knight who was both intellectual and naturally eccentric. Have you ever tried living the life of another person just to do your job well? 14. The mural is the work of a family member. There are tiny details in movies that if you blink, you will miss forever. If you look closely at the walls in the messy room of Chris and Mitch, you will see hand-drawn paintings with a strongly eccentric art style. Normally, those are just some lifeless props hastily gathered by the design team from the storage. But in real genius, they carry an extremely deep personal meaning. Those artworks were created by the very hands of Wesley Kilmer, the biological younger brother of Val Kilmer. It is heartwarming to know that, amidst a Hollywood movie project reeking of money, the director still reserved a small corner to honor family affection and the talent of a family member of the main actor. Every time I re-watch this scene, I feel like I'm peeking into a private family memory of the Kilmers. 15. The shadow of Caltech is everywhere. Although the main setting of the story takes place at a school with the fictional name Pacific Tech, anyone observant who has ever lived in California would immediately recognize an obvious truth. The soul and body of that school were borrowed 100% from the California Institute of Technology, also known as the renowned Caltech. The film crew did not just copy the architecture or the typical nerdy atmosphere, but they also made a very smart move. hiring real Caltech students as academic advisors and extras. The boys engrossed in piles of machines, the winding mathematical expressions on the blackboards, everything was verified by real-life genius minds. That is why the movie brings such an authentic and vivid feeling instead of just a forced setting. Have you ever stepped into a college campus and felt the atmosphere of wisdom so much that it naturally made you want to open a book to study? 16. The genius living in the closet is not fiction. Do you remember Laszlo Holyfeld? The genius guy who chose to live holed up in a closet and wander under the underground systems of the school. At first, I thought this was just a typical silly Hollywood exaggeration to make the audience laugh. But the truth behind it carries a bit of sorrow and is extremely real. The writers did not hallucinate Laszlo. This character was directly inspired by true stories at the California Institute of Technology. Under massive academic pressure, some outstanding students actually broke down, refused to socialize, and moved down to live in the maintenance tunnel system of the school to build a separate world of their own. The more I think about this, the more I admire the movie for skillfully weaving a deep psychological dark side into a humorous shell. Has the pressure of life ever weighed you down so much that you just wanted to find a small corner to hide from the world? 17. The tape recorder attending class trick. One of the scenes that makes me laugh the most is the weirdest class in cinematic history. You definitely remember this scene. At first, a student secretly placed a tape recorder on the desk and sneaked away, then two people, and then a whole large lecture hall was filled with clunky tape recorders of the 80s, obediently recording the lecture from another tape recorder of the professor? You would think that is the peak of satire. But no, this is a real page of history. This excellent visual joke was taken exactly from the actual habits of students at prestigious schools like MIT or Caltech at that time. Because their laboratory schedules were so packed, they actually used this trick to not miss lectures. Imagine the clanking sound of dozens of cassette tapes spinning at the same time. I am really curious how they managed to actually pass the final exams. 18. The inspiration for an iconic Disney character. Now, let us talk about Jordan, the nerdy girl who never sleeps, talks incessantly like a machine and can fix anything. In the 80s, building a female character who was brilliant at engineering was very rare. And if you ever had young children in the early 90s, or you yourself were a devotee of Saturday mornings glued to the TV, then this information will make you gasp in amazement. The hyperactive energy, the baggy overalls, and the passion for machinery of Jordan were the direct inspiration for Disney to mold the adorable mechanic mouse gadget Hackwrench in the legendary animated series Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. That is right, that little mouse wearing safety goggles is actually the animated version embodiment of Jordan. The Disney team was so impressed with the acting of Michelle Myrink that they used it as a template. The next time you see Gadget, I bet you will immediately remember the silhouette of Jordan. 19. The first computer press conference in the world. Let us travel back in time to 1985 for a bit. That was when the internet as we know it today did not even exist. That was the era of dial-up modems that sounded like screaming machines, and computer screens only had monotonous lines of text. But because real genius is a work honoring minds ahead of their time, the marketing team decided to do something unprecedented. They held a press conference to promote the movie entirely through the CompuServe network. This bold event was officially recognized as the first online press conference in world cinema history. Try to imagine the scene of journalists patiently sitting in front of bulky CRT monitors, waiting for each line of text to slowly display through the primitive connection. It was a great and risky move. Do you still remember the thrill of the first time you connected to the internet and heard that legendary modem sound? 20. The century-old rumor about a cameo of Tom Hanks. Finally, we will close the nostalgia tape of today with a mystery that has kept the fan community gluing their eyes to the television screen for nearly 4 decades. There is an urban legend that is always whispered among movie buffs. Actor Tom Hanks is said to have made a fleeting appearance in a crowd scene of the movie. It is worth noting that 1985 was also the time Tom Hanks was starting to rise with Splash or Bachelor Party. Many viewers swore they saw his youthful face peeking from behind. But you know what the craziest thing is? Until this very day, no one in the production crew, and not even Tom Hanks himself, has ever spoken up to confirm or deny this. It has become a beautiful little secret of Hollywood, keeping the appeal of the movie alive. Have you ever pressed the pause button on an old VHS player just to try to hunt down an anonymous star? So we have reached the final footage of the memory tape about Real Genius together. Looking back at these crazy facts, I suddenly realized that sometimes the very recklessness, clumsiness, and rusticity behind the lens are what create eternal magic on the silver screen. They really do not make movies with such a strong handmade and carefree nature like this anymore, do they? Among the secrets today, which one made you gasp in amazement the most? Is it the house exploding with tons of real popcorn? Or the century-old rumor about Tom Hanks? Please share right below in the comments section. I am always here, and very much looking forward to reading your nostalgic lines. If you loved this time travel journey, do not forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so we can continue to dissect other interesting hidden corners of Hollywood. Thank you for spending the evening sitting with me. See you again in the next videos.